Maya Chen was 19 years old when her world fell apart. It happened on a cold Tuesday morning in November. The hospital room smelled like cleaning products and something else she couldn't name. Her mother, Lynn, lay in the bed, thin and pale. Nothing like the woman who used to chase her around the kitchen with a wooden spoon when she stole cookies before dinner. Cancer. That was the word that had destroyed everything. It started in her mother's lungs and spread like wildfire through her body. The doctors said they caught it too late. By the time Lynn started coughing up blood, the disease had already made itself at home in places it should never have reached. Maya held her mother's hand in those final hours. Lynn's fingers were cold, but she still managed to squeeze back. Her eyes, though tired, still held that familiar warmth that Maya had known her entire life. "My little bird," Lynn whispered. Her voice was barely there, like wind through dry leaves. "You are stronger than you know." Maya wanted to say something. She wanted to tell her mother that she loved her, that she wasn't ready to let go, that she needed more time. But the words got stuck somewhere between her heart and her throat. All she could do was nod and hold on tighter. Lynn smiled one last time. Then her eyes closed, and she was gone. Maya didn't cry at the funeral. She stood in her black dress, accepting hugs from relatives she barely knew, nodding at their kind words about what a wonderful woman her mother had been. Everyone kept telling her it was okay to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. It was like someone had built a wall inside her chest, trapping everything behind it. Her father had left when Maya was 3 years old. She had no memory of him, just a few old photographs her mother kept in a shoebox under her bed. So it had always been just the two of them against the world. Lynn worked double shifts at the restaurant to pay for Maya's school supplies. She stayed up late helping with homework even when she could barely keep her eyes open. She made birthdays feel special, even when money was tight. And every single morning, without fail, Lynn would hum a song while making breakfast. It was an old melody, soft and beautiful, with notes that seemed to float through the air like dandelion seeds. Maya had asked about it once when she was 12. "Where does that song come from, Mom?" Lynn had paused, spatula in hand, a faraway look in her eyes. "My mother taught it to me when I was a little girl in Taiwan. She said it was a very special song, but she never told me why. I have hummed it every day since I was your age. Does it have words?" "No words. Just music. But sometimes music says more than words ever could." Maya never heard that song anywhere else. Not on the radio. Not in movies. Not in any store or restaurant. It existed only in her mother's voice. Only in their small kitchen. Only in the early morning light when the world was still quiet. It was their secret melody. A thread connecting 3 generations of women who had never met. After Lynn died, the apartment felt like a tomb. Maya couldn't bring herself to change anything. Her mother's slipper still sat by the door. Her favorite mug still rested on the kitchen counter, a faint ring of dried tea at the bottom. The jasmine perfume she always wore still lingered in the bedroom. Growing fainter with each passing day, Maya went through the motions of living. She attended her college classes, but she couldn't focus. The professors' voices sounded like they were coming from underwater. She worked her part-time job at the bookstore, shelving novels and smiling at customers, but the smile never reached her eyes. Her coworkers noticed. They whispered behind her back, not out of cruelty, but out of concern. "She's not doing well," they said. Someone should talk to her. But what was there to say? Her mother was dead. No amount of talking would bring her back. Maya's roommate, a kind girl named Priya, tried her best to help. She left little notes on Maya's desk. She cooked meals and left them in the fridge. She invited Maya to movie nights and study sessions and walks in the park. But Maya always said no. She preferred to stay in her room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence where her mother's humming used to be. The grief sat inside her like a stone, heavy, cold, impossible to move. She knew she should cry. Everyone said crying helped. But every time she felt the tears coming, something inside her pushed them back down. It was like her body had decided that if she started crying, she might never stop. 6 months passed. Winter turned to spring, and spring melted into summer. Maya lost weight because she forgot to eat. She stopped calling her aunts and uncles back. She dropped out of her photography club, the one thing that used to bring her joy. The camera her mother had saved for 3 years to buy her now gathered dust on her shelf. One Saturday morning in June, Priya finally put her foot down. "You're coming to the mall with me?" she announced, standing in Maya's doorway with her arms crossed. "And before you say no, I'm not asking. I'm telling." Maya looked up from her bed. "I don't want to go anywhere. I know you don't. No. But you haven't left this apartment in 2 weeks, except for work. You need sunlight. You need fresh air. You need to be around people. People are exhausting." Priya walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. Her voice softened. "Maya, I know you're hurting. I know nothing I say can make it better. But your mom wouldn't want you to disappear like this. She would want you to live." Maya felt something twist in her chest at the mention of her mother. She wanted to argue, to say that Priya didn't understand, that no one understood. But she was too tired to fight. "Fine," she said quietly. 1 hour. That's it. Priya's face lit up. "That's all I'm asking. 1 hour. We'll walk around, maybe get some ice cream, and then I'll bring you straight home, deal?" Maya nodded, not because she believed it would help, but because it was easier than saying no again. She got dressed slowly, pulling on jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back. Dark circles under her eyes. Cheekbones too sharp. Hair that hadn't been properly brushed in days. She looked like a ghost. Maybe that's what she was now. A ghost of the person she used to be. The drive to the mall was quiet. Priya tried to make small talk, pointing out a funny billboard, mentioning a new coffee shop that had opened downtown. Maya responded with nods and one-word answers. She watched the buildings pass by outside the window, feeling nothing. When they arrived at Riverside Mall, the Saturday crowd was already in full swing. Families with strollers. Teenagers laughing in groups. Couples holding hands. Everyone seemed so normal, so happy, so unaware that somewhere in the world, people were drowning in sadness they couldn't explain. Maya followed Priya through the entrance, already counting down the minutes until she could go home. She had no idea that in less than an hour, her entire life was about to change. She had no idea that somewhere inside this building, an old man was sitting at a piano, about to play a song that would shatter everything she thought she knew about grief, about fate, and about the mysterious ways love finds its way back to us. The mall was loud. That was the first thing Maya noticed. Music pumping from clothing stores. Children screaming in the play area. The constant buzz of hundreds of conversations mixing together into one endless noise. It made her head hurt. Priya looped her arm through Maya's and guided her past the food court. The smell of fried food and cinnamon rolls hit Maya's nose, but she felt no hunger. She hadn't felt truly hungry in months. Eating had become just another task to check off, like brushing her teeth or putting on shoes. "Let's start with the bookstore," Priya suggested. "I know you love books. Maybe we can find something good." Maya shrugged. She used to love books. She used to lose herself in stories for hours, curled up on the couch while her mother cooked dinner nearby. But lately, the words on pages just blurred together. She couldn't concentrate long enough to finish a single chapter. They wandered through the bookstore anyway. Priya picked up novels and read the back covers out loud, trying to spark some interest. Maya nodded politely but didn't really listen. Her mind kept drifting back to the apartment, to her mother's empty bedroom, to the silence that waited for her at home. After 20 minutes, they left without buying anything. "How about some bubble tea?" Priya tried again. "There's a new place on the second floor. They have that taro flavor you used to like." "Sure," Maya said, because it was easier than explaining that nothing tasted right anymore. Everything she ate or drank seemed to turn to cardboard in her mouth. Another thing grief had stolen from her. They took the escalator up, passing by jewelry stores and shoe shops and one of those places that sold phone cases with glitter inside. Maya remembered coming here with her mother last Christmas. Lynn had insisted on buying matching scarves for both of them, even though Maya said she was too old for matching outfits. Now that scarf was folded in Maya's drawer. She couldn't bring herself to wear it or throw it away. The bubble tea shop had a long line. Priya joined the queue while Maya stood off to the side, leaning against a pillar. She pulled out her phone and scrolled without really seeing anything. Social media was full of people living their happy lives, posting pictures of vacations and pets and meals that looked too pretty to eat. It all felt so far away, like watching a movie about a world she no longer belonged to. That's when she heard it. At first, she thought she was imagining things. It was just a few notes floating above the noise of the mall, barely there. But something about those notes made her freeze. Her thumb stopped scrolling. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that melody. Maya looked up, her heart suddenly pounding. Where was it coming from? The sound was faint, almost swallowed by the chatter and the music from nearby stores. But it was there. She was sure of it. She pushed off from the pillar and started walking. Her feet moved on their own, pulling her toward the sound like a magnet. She didn't tell Priya where she was going. She didn't even think about it. All she knew was that she had to find the source of that music. The melody grew louder as she approached the central atrium. This part of the mall had high ceilings and a large fountain in the middle, water splashing over smooth stones. And there, next to the fountain, sat a piano. Maya had seen public pianos before. They'd become popular in malls and train stations, places where anyone could sit down and play. Usually it was kids banging out chopsticks, or teenagers showing off pop songs they learned from YouTube. But the man sitting at this piano was different. He was old, maybe 70, maybe older. His hair was completely silver, combed back neatly from his forehead. He wore a simple gray sweater and dark pants, nothing fancy. His posture was slightly hunched, the way old people sometimes get when their bones have carried them through to many years. But his hands moved across the keys with a grace that seemed to belong to a much younger man, and he was playing her mother's song. Maya stopped breathing. The world around her seemed to blur and fade. The fountain, the shoppers, the noise of the mall, everything dissolved until there was nothing left but her and the old man in that impossible melody. It was exactly the same. Every note, every pause, every gentle rise and fall. This was the song her mother had hummed every morning for as long as Maya could remember. The song her grandmother had taught her mother back in Taiwan. The song that existed nowhere else in the entire world except in Maya's memories. How was this possible? Maya's legs felt weak. She took a step forward, then another, drawn to the piano like a moth to flame. Her vision started to blur, and she realized with shock that tears were forming in her eyes. Real tears. The tears that had refused to come for 6 months were finally breaking through. She tried to hold them back. Not here, not in public. But the music kept playing, each note reaching inside her chest and pulling at something deep and raw. It was like the old man's fingers were unlocking a door she had welded shut, forcing it open whether she wanted it or not. Memories flooded through her. Her mother standing at the stove, humming while flipping pancakes. Her mother braiding Maya's hair before school, the melody soft and low. Her mother sitting beside her bed when she was sick, humming until Maya fell asleep. 1,000 mornings, 1,000 moments. It's all tied together by this one simple song. And now a stranger was playing it in the middle of a shopping mall. As if it was the most natural thing in the world, Maya reached the edge of the small crowd that had gathered to listen. A few people sat on benches, watching casually. Others walked by without stopping, too busy with their own lives to notice the music. None of them understood what they were hearing. None of them knew that this song was supposed to be impossible. The old man's eyes were closed as he played. There was something peaceful about his face, but also something sad. His fingers knew the melody by heart. He didn't need to look at the keys. He didn't need sheet music. This was a song that lived inside him, as natural as breathing. Maya wanted to call out to him, to ask him how he knew this music, to demand an explanation. But her voice wouldn't work. The tears were falling freely now, streaming down her cheeks, and she couldn't stop them. 6 months of frozen grief was melting all at once, and it was too much. It was way too much. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Probably Priya, wondering where she had gone. But Maya couldn't move. She couldn't look away from the old man and his silver hair and his weathered hands dancing across the keys. The song was reaching its end. Maya knew every part of it by heart. She knew the way it slowed down in the final measures, the way the notes seemed to hang in the air like questions without answers. She had heard her mother hum this ending hundreds of times, usually followed by the sound of plates being set on the table and a cheerful call of breakfast is ready. Little bird. But now there was no breakfast. There was no mother. There was only this old stranger and a song that shouldn't exist outside her own memories. The final note faded into silence. Maya stood there, tears dripping off her chin, her whole body trembling. The crowd offered polite applause and began to scatter, returning to their shopping and their ordinary lives. But Maya couldn't move. The old man opened his eyes, and then, slowly he turned his head and looked directly at her. Their eyes met across the space between them. His eyes were deep brown, warm but heavy with years of something Maya couldn't name. He saw her tears. He saw her shaking hands. And something in his expression shifted. Curiosity, concern, recognition of a pain. He somehow understood. Maya opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her knees buckled. The world tilted sideways, and then everything went dark. Maya didn't fully lose consciousness. It was more like the world went fuzzy around the edges, sounds becoming muffled and distant, her body suddenly too heavy to hold up. She felt herself falling, felt her knees hit the cold tile floor, but it didn't hurt. Nothing hurt except the massive wave of emotion crashing through her chest. She heard voices around her. Someone gasped. Someone else called out asking if she was okay. Footsteps rushed toward her from different directions. But Maya couldn't respond. She was too busy drowning in the tears that wouldn't stop coming. 6 months. 6 months of pushing everything down, of pretending she was fine, of refusing to let herself feel the full weight of losing her mother. And now it was all pouring out at once, in the middle of a crowded mall. Next to a fountain and a piano and an old man she had never seen before in her life. She curled forward, her hands pressed against the floor, her shoulders shaking with sobs she couldn't control. The sounds coming out of her didn't even sound human. They were raw and broken, like an animal in pain. She had never cried like this before. She didn't know she was capable of crying like this. Maya. Maya. Priya's voice cut through the fog. Maya felt her friend's hands on her shoulders, pulling her upright, brushing hair away from her wet face. Priya looked terrified. What happened? Are you hurt? Should I call someone? Maya tried to answer, but couldn't form words. She just shook her head, more tears spilling down her cheeks. How could she explain this? How could she tell Priya that a stranger had just played a song that was supposed to be impossible, and that hearing it had ripped open every wound she had spent months trying to ignore? A small crowd had gathered now. People stood at a distance, watching with concerned expressions, but unsure whether to get involved. A security guard was walking over, speaking into his radio. Maya felt embarrassed and exposed, but she couldn't stop crying. The tears had their own agenda now. Then a new voice spoke, soft and gentle, cutting through the noise. Please, give her some space. Maya looked up through blurry eyes. The old man from the piano was standing there. He had left his bench and made his way over to her. Up close, she could see the deep lines on his face, the kindness in his brown eyes, the slight tremble in his weathered hands. He looked at her like he understood something the others didn't. The security guard stepped forward. Sir, do you know this young woman? No, the old man said quietly. But I think I know why she's crying. He lowered himself down slowly, his old knees protesting as he knelt on the tile floor beside Maya. Priya moved back slightly, giving him room, but staying close enough to intervene if needed. The crowd watched in silence, sensing that something unusual was happening. The old man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small handkerchief. It was old-fashioned, white cotton with a faded blue border. He held it out to Maya without saying anything. She took it with shaking hands and pressed it against her face. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and something else she couldn't identify. Something comforting. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Maya focused on breathing, on trying to slow down the sobs that kept coming in waves. The old man waited patiently, not rushing her, not asking questions. He just stayed there beside her, a quiet presence in the middle of the chaos. Finally, when Maya could trust her voice again, she looked at him. "That song," she whispered. "How do you know that song?" The old man's expression shifted. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, or a pain that mirrored her own. "You knew it," he said softly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, heavy with meaning. Maya nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "My mother used to sing it. Every morning. Every single morning for my whole life. She learned it from her mother, my grandmother. She said it was special, but she never told me why." The old man's face went pale. His hands, already trembling, began to shake more visibly. He reached out and steadied himself against the floor, as if Maya's words had physically struck him. "Your mother," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What was her name?" Lin Chen." The old man closed his eyes. A single tear escaped from beneath his eyelid and rolled down his weathered cheek. He stayed like that for several seconds, not moving, not speaking, just processing something Maya couldn't understand. "And your grandmother?" he finally asked, opening his eyes again. "What was her name?" Maya frowned slightly, confused by the question, but answering anyway. "Mei Ling. My grandmother's name was Mei Ling. She passed away 10 years ago. I never got to meet her." The old man made a sound then, something between a laugh and a sob. He covered his mouth with his hand, his whole body trembling now. The security guard stepped forward again, concerned, but the old man waved him away. "I'm all right," he managed to say. "I'm all right. I just need a moment." Priya knelt down beside Maya, putting a protective arm around her shoulders. "Maya, what's going on? Do you know this man?" "No," Maya said, her eyes fixed on the old man's face. "I've never seen him before. But he knows the song. He knows my mother's song." The old man looked at her then, really looked at her, studying her features, as if searching for something. Whatever he found made more tears stream down his face. "You have her eyes," he whispered. "Your grandmother. You have Mei Ling's eyes." Maya's heart stopped. The world seemed to freeze around her. How could this stranger know her grandmother? How could he know what her eyes looked like? Mei Ling had died in Taiwan a decade ago. She had never come to America. She had never left her hometown. "How do you know my grandmother?" Maya demanded, her voice cracking. "Who are you?" The old man took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and sat back on his heels. "My name is Henry Park," he said slowly. "And 50 years ago, in a small town in Taiwan, I was in love with a woman named Mei Ling. I wrote that song for her. I called it Jasmine Morning." Maya felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her. She stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "That's impossible," she breathed. "I know it sounds impossible," Henry said gently, "but I promise you, it's true. I composed that melody in the summer of 1974. I played it for Mei Ling on a warm night in July, under a sky full of stars. It was supposed to be a gift, a promise. I was going to ask her to marry me." His voice broke on the last words. He paused, gathering himself, before continuing. "But life had other plans. My family moved to America. Her family wouldn't let her follow. We lost each other in a time when there were no emails, no cell phones, no way to stay connected across oceans. I wrote letters, but they came back unopened. I tried to find her, but it was like searching for a ghost." Maya sat completely still, tears drying on her cheeks, her mind racing to make sense of what she was hearing. This old man had loved her grandmother. He had written the song that had been passed down through her family for generations. The song her grandmother taught her mother. The song her mother hummed every morning while making breakfast. "She never forgot the song," Maya said quietly. "My grandmother taught it to my mother, and my mother hummed it every day of her life until she died 6 months ago." Henry's face crumpled. He reached out and took Maya's hand in his grip warm despite the trembling. Mei Ling remembered. he whispered, wonder and heartbreak mixing in his voice. After all these years, she remembered. Out around them, the mall continued its ordinary business. People walked past with shopping bags. Children laughed by the fountain. Music played from distant stores. But for Maya and the old man kneeling on the floor beside her, time had stopped. 50 years of separation, 3 generations of women, and one simple melody had somehow brought them together in the most unexpected place imaginable. Maya looked at this stranger who was no longer a stranger, and for the first time since her mother died, she felt something other than emptiness. She felt hope. They moved to a quiet bench near the back of the mall, away from the crowds and the noise. Priya offered to get them some water and disappeared toward the food court. Leaving Maya alone with Henry, the old man sat with his hands folded in his lap. Staring at nothing, lost in memories that were half a century old, Maya waited. She had so many questions spinning in her head, but she could see that Henry needed time to gather himself. Whatever he was about to tell her, it wasn't easy. The weight of it showed in every line on his face. Finally, he began to speak. I was 22 years old when I first saw her, he said softly, young and stupid and full of dreams. My father was a businessman who traveled between America and Asia that summer, brought me to Taiwan to learn the family trade. I hated it. Numbers and contracts and meetings that went on forever. All I wanted to do was play music. He paused, a faint smile crossing his lips at the memory. There was a small park near the hotel where we stayed. It had a pond with lotus flowers and a bench under an old banyan tree. I used to sneak away from my father's meetings and sit there with my notebook writing melodies in my head. That's where I first saw Mei Ling. Maya leaned forward, hungry for every detail. This was her grandmother he was talking about. A woman she had never met, whose face she only knew from faded photographs. She worked at a tailor shop nearby, Henry continued. She would walk through the park on her lunch breaks, always carrying a small bag with her food. She was beautiful, but not in the way that makes you stare. It was quieter than that, gentler. She had this way of moving, like she was always listening to music no one else could hear. His voice grew thick with emotion. I watched her for 3 days before I found the courage to speak to her. When I finally did, I made a complete fool of myself. I tried to say hello in Mandarin, but got the tones wrong and accidentally told her that her shoes were angry. Maya let out a small, surprised laugh. It felt strange to laugh after everything that had happened, but she couldn't help it. Henry smiled at the sound. She laughed too, that beautiful, warm laugh that made her whole face light up. And instead of walking away from the strange American boy who couldn't speak properly, she sat down next to me and taught me the right way to say it. Every day for the rest of that summer, we met in that park. I would bring my notebook and hum melodies while she ate her lunch. She would tell me stories about growing up in Taiwan, about her family, about her dreams of one day seeing the ocean. She had never been to the coast. Can you imagine? Living on an island your whole life and never seeing the sea. He shook his head slowly. I fell in love with her so fast it scared me. By the end of August, I couldn't imagine my life without her. I started writing a song for her, something that would capture everything I felt but couldn't say with words. I worked on it for weeks, changing notes, adjusting the melody, trying to make it perfect. Jasmine morning, Maya whispered. Henry nodded. I called it that because she always smelled like jasmine. She said her mother grew jasmine flowers in their garden, and she helped pick them every morning before work. The scent stayed on her hands, her hair, her clothes. Even now, 50 years later, I can't smell jasmine without thinking of her. He was quiet for a moment, lost in the memory. Then he continued. September came too quickly. My father's business was finished, and we were scheduled to return to America. I knew I couldn't leave without telling Mei Ling how I felt. So I planned everything. I found a spot on a hill overlooking the town where you could see the stars without any lights blocking them. I borrowed a small keyboard from a music shop, and on our last night together, I took her there and played the song for the first time. His voice broke. She cried when she heard it. Happy tears, she said. She told me it was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for her, and then I asked her to marry me. I got down on one knee right there on that hill, under all those stars, and asked her to come to America and be my wife. Maya held her breath. What did she say? She said yes. Henry's eyes glistened. She said yes, and I thought my heart would burst from happiness. We made plans. I would go back to America, talk to my father, arrange everything. She would tell her family. I promised I would send for her within 6 months. I promised I would never forget her. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with old pain. But when Mei Ling told her family about us, they refused. Her father was a traditional man. He didn't want his daughter marrying a foreigner, moving to a country across the ocean, leaving everything she knew behind. He forbade her from seeing me again. He took away her letters before she could send them. When my letters arrived, he burned them without telling her. Maya felt anger rise in her chest on behalf of a grandmother she had never known. I didn't know any of this at the time, Henry said. All I knew was that my letters went unanswered. I wrote every week for a year. I called the tailor shop, but they said she no longer worked there. I even tried to go back to Taiwan, but my father needed me in the business. And international travel was expensive and complicated back then. There was no internet to search for her. No social media to find her profile. She just vanished from my life like smoke. He looked down at his trembling hands. I spent years trying to find her. I hired people to search. I contacted every Chen family in that town. But it was like looking for a single star in the sky. Eventually, I had to accept that she was gone. Maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe she had found someone else. Maybe she had never loved me as much as I loved her. I didn't know. I just knew that the silence was killing me. But you never married, Maya said quietly. You never moved on. Henry shook his head. How could I? Every woman I met, I compared to her. It wasn't fair to them or to me. So I stayed alone. I built a small life for myself. I taught piano lessons to children. I played in restaurants and hotels. And every single day, I played Jasmine Morning. I told myself that somehow, somewhere, she might hear it. Foolish, I know. But hope is a stubborn thing. Priya returned with bottles of water, handing one to each of them. She sat down next to Maya but stayed quiet, sensing that something important was happening. Maya took a sip of water, her mind still processing everything she had heard. My grandmother got married a few years after you left, she said slowly. My mother told me it was an arranged marriage. She said my grandmother was never unhappy, but she was never quite happy either. Like she was always waiting for something that never came. Henry closed his eyes, pain written across his face. She had a daughter, Maya continued, my mother Lynn, and she taught my mother that song. She hummed it every day, just like you played it every day. She passed it down like a secret, even though she never explained where it came from. She remembered, Henry said again, his voice cracking. All those years, she remembered. She never forgot you, Maya said, realizing the truth as she spoke it. She couldn't talk about you. She couldn't write to you. But she kept your song alive. She taught it to her daughter, and her daughter taught it to me by humming it every morning while I grew up. Henry reached out and took Maya's hand. His grip was warm and gentle, the hands of a man who had spent his whole life making music. I spent 50 years wondering if she ever thought of me, he whispered, and now I know. She thought of me every single day. She kept our song in her heart and passed it on to the people she loved most. Tears rolled down both their faces now. 50 years of separation, two people who loved each other until the very end, connected across time and death by a simple melody, and somehow against all odds that melody had brought Maya to this moment, to this bench, to this old man who had loved her grandmother before her mother was even born. It was impossible. It was miraculous. It was the strangest, most beautiful gift Maya had ever received. Maya and Henry sat on that bench for 3 hours. The mall closed around them, shops pulling down their metal shutters, the fountain going quiet, the crowds thinning until only a few security guards remained. Priya stayed nearby the whole time, watching over them like a guardian angel, giving them the space they needed while making sure Maya was safe. They talked about everything. Henry told Maya more stories about her grandmother, How Mei Ling used to fold paper cranes when she was nervous. How she had a birthmark shaped like a tiny heart on her left wrist. How she laughed with her whole body, throwing her head back like joy was too big to contain. Details that no photograph could ever capture. Details that Maya treasured like gold. In return, Maya told Henry about her mother. How Lin had inherited her own mother's gentle spirit. How she worked herself to exhaustion to give Maya a good life. How she never complained, never asked for anything, never stopped believing that better days were coming even when times were hard. And how she hummed that song every single morning without fail, passing on a legacy she didn't even fully understand by the time they finally stood up to leave. Something had shifted between them. They were no longer strangers. They were family in a way that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with love that had traveled across 50 years and 2 generations to bring them together. Henry wrote his phone number on the back of a receipt and pressed it into Maya's hand. "Don't expect anything," he said quietly. "I know this is a lot to process, but if you ever want to talk, or if you ever want to hear more stories about your grandmother, I'm here. I've been alone for a very long time. I would be honored to know you, Maya. You're the closest thing to Mei Ling I will ever have again." Maya looked at the number in her hand, then back at the old man's kind face. For the first time in months, she felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not quite happiness, not yet, but something close. Something that felt like the first ray of sunlight after a long, dark winter. "I'll call you," she promised. "I want to know everything." She meant it. The next Sunday, Maya showed up at Henry's small apartment on the east side of town. It was a modest place. It's filled with books and old photographs and a beautiful upright piano that stood against the living room wall. The piano was old, but well-maintained. Its wood polished to a warm shine. Its keys slightly yellowed from decades of use. Henry made tea and served it in delicate cups that he said had belonged to his mother. They sat together and talked some more, filling in the gaps of their stories, learning the shape of each other's lives. Maya discovered that Henry had never had children of his own. He had spent his career teaching music to young people, pouring his love into students who came and went over the years. But he had always been alone when he came home at night. Always just him and the piano and the song he couldn't stop playing. "Would you like to learn it?" Henry asked suddenly. Maya blinked. "Learn what?" "Jasmine Morning, a song. Would you like me to teach you how to play it?" Maya looked at the piano, then back at Henry. She had never learned to play. Her mother couldn't afford lessons, and Maya had never pushed for them. But now, sitting in this small apartment with this old man who had carried her grandmother's memory for half a century, she wanted nothing more. "Yes," she said. "I would love that." They started that very day. Henry was a patient teacher, guiding her fingers to the right keys, explaining the rhythm and the feel of the melody. Maya was clumsy at first. Her fingers stumbled over notes. She hit wrong keys and lost the tempo and had to start over again and again. But she didn't give up. Every mistake felt like a step closer to something important. Every Sunday after that, Maya returned to Henry's apartment. The lessons became a ritual, something she looked forward to all week. But they were about more than just music. Between practice sessions, they would eat lunch together and share stories. Henry told her about his travels, his students, the small joys and quiet sorrows of a life lived mostly in solitude. Maya told him about college, about her dreams of becoming a photographer, about the grief that still sat heavy in her chest but was slowly becoming easier to carry. Weeks turned into months. Summer faded into fall, and fall gave way to the first cold winds of winter. Maya improved on the piano. Her fingers found the keys more easily now. The melody that had once seemed impossible began to flow through her hands like water, but more importantly, she began to heal. The grief didn't disappear. It never would. Her mother was gone, and that loss would always be part of her. But it no longer felt like drowning. It felt more like carrying something precious, something that hurt, but also reminded her of how much love she had been lucky enough to receive. Henry became the grandfather she never had. He came to her apartment for Thanksgiving dinner, sitting at the small table with Maya and Priya. telling jokes that made them laugh until their sides hurt. He called her every Wednesday evening just to check in, his voice warm and steady on the other end of the line. He celebrated her 21st birthday with a small cake and a card that said he was proud of her, and through it all, the song connected them. Jasmine Morning, a bridge between past and present, between the people they had lost and the family they had found. November arrived, marking 1 year since Maya's mother had passed away. The family planned a small memorial at the cemetery where Lynn was buried. Aunts and uncles flew in from different states. Cousins Maya hadn't seen in years gathered to pay their respects. It was a cold, gray day. It's a kind of day that seemed to match the heaviness in everyone's hearts. But Maya had prepared something special. She had rented a keyboard and set it up near her mother's grave. When the time came for her to speak, she didn't give a speech. Instead, she sat down at the keyboard, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. Jasmine Morning filled the quiet cemetery. The notes drifted through the cold air, past the bare trees, over the rows of headstones. Maya played with her eyes closed, feeling every note in her bones. Letting the music say everything words could not, she played for her mother, who had hummed this song every morning of her life. She played for her grandmother, who had kept a forbidden love alive through melody alone. She played for Henry, who sat in the front row with tears streaming down his face, finally hearing his song performed by the granddaughter of the woman he had loved and lost. And she played for herself, for the girl who had collapsed crying in a mall 6 months ago, for the girl who had thought she would never feel whole again, for the girl who had learned that love doesn't die. It just changes form. It becomes a song, a memory, a story passed down through generations, until it finds its way back to the people who need it most. When the last note faded, there was silence. Then her aunt started crying. Then her uncle. Then everyone was wiping their eyes and hugging each other, bound together by a melody that none of them had fully understood until now. Henry found Maya afterward. He pulled her into a hug, his thin arms surprisingly strong, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for bringing her back to me. Thank you for finishing what we started all those years ago." Maya held on to him tightly. This old man who had become her family, this stranger who had changed her life with a song. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered back. "I didn't know how lost I was until you helped me find my way home." Some people called it coincidence, a random encounter at a mall, an old man who happened to play a forgotten song at exactly the right moment. But Maya knew the truth. Her mother and grandmother had sent her a message from somewhere beyond. They had guided her to that piano, to that man, to that song. They had reminded her that love never truly dies. It echoes through time, through music, through the hearts of the people we leave behind. And sometimes, when we need it most, it finds its way back to us in the most unexpected ways.